quick look. Yeah, they'll come annoy me, but I guess I have a 425 hard out or something like that. So, okay.
Yeah, she's just joined us. But good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the channel. We are seeing the hopeful signing of a deal on Friday between the United States and Iran. But we were also seeing Donald Trump in Geneva 5 days before as part of the G7. And what Putin was apparently asking Trump to do, which was put pressure on the Europeans to try to get Ukraine to play ball, because things are not seemingly going very well for the Kremlin right now. Point being is there's a lot of geopolitical shifts happening, and I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by one of the most prominent names in the world, if not the most, Ian Bremmer, founder of Eurasia Group and G0 Media, and someone who I've been very hopeful to get on for a while. And here we are. So, Ian, welcome to the show.
Happy to join you, man.
Yeah, so let's just kick off. I have sort of a broader set of themes, and unfortunately, Trump seems to be the prevailing theme amongst all of them. But right now, the deal looks to be done, but not signed. And I'm curious, how delicate does it look to you? Could we see it fall apart before even Friday?
It's interesting. The folks I've heard from in the intelligence community are actually much more negative than I am. They think it could fall apart very easily. They're worried about the Israel-Lebanon angle blowing it up. They're worried about the fact that the Iranians aren't going to make progress on the nuclear side. Means the Americans could come back and say this is unacceptable. In 60 days' time, you don't get there, it blows up. I'm pretty comfortable that the strait will actually now reopen, and once it is reopened, it will largely stay reopened. But that's very different from saying that there's a deal. It's very different from saying that now we're on a path to rebuilding Iran and declaring peace in the region and having a new, much better than the old JCPOA nuclear deal. I don't think any of those things are happening. So you get the strait reopened, but you're in a materially worse position than the status quo ante back in February before the war started.
Now, some people have called this not the JCPOA, but simply the POA. Not a plan of action, but just a plan of acquiescence. Is this just a worse condition of what the Obama administration had managed before?
Oh, definitely. Now, look, part of the reason, I mean, obviously, a lot of people think that the Obama deal is the worst thing ever because anything Obama did was horrible, right? So you have the political polarization in the U.S. that makes these things harder to suss out and makes a lot of people turn off from the whole process, of course. Secondly, the deal was oversold by John Kerry, notably, and by Obama at the time. It took a long time. This was, Kerry thought himself as a person that should have been president. This was his effort at his own Nobel Peace Prize. He never really made hay on Israel-Palestine. So this was his big deal. And they oversold it because it wasn't about ballistic missiles. It wasn't about support for proxies. It did not remove significant sanctions from Iran. It unfroze some of their own assets, and it constrained their nuclear ambitions. And that was what it did. So in my view, it was an okay deal. I think it was worth doing, but it was a marginal improvement in what the U.S. and most allies consider to be a rogue state that supports terrorism. But one thing that was important about the JCPOA is it wasn't unilateral. It involved American allies as well as the Russians and the Chinese, all of whom were bought in to maintaining the deal, which meant ensuring that the inspectors were actually in there. And keeping the Iranians from developing nuclear capabilities. And this deal that Trump hopes to cut with the Iranians, not the one to be signed on Friday, which just reopens the strait, but to eventually constrain their nuclear program, this deal would be unilateral. And the Iranians, even if they come to sign it at some point, if they end up in a stronger position with other countries in the region and around the world, would have much more capacity to break it than they did unilaterally withdrawing from the JCPOA. So I think in many ways, this deal that Trump is doing is weaker. There's also the money component. Of course, President Trump was so hostile about the $1.8 billion in Iranian assets, the pallets of cash that were unfrozen by the Obama administration. Now, there's a lot more money that's getting unfrozen this time around, and not for anything that they've done on the nuclear file, but rather just to reopen the strait, which had been open before the war. Now, the Americans deny that they're going to provide any money to Iran, and that's because the assets will be unfrozen by the Qataris and by the Emiratis. But that's being coordinated behind the scenes by the United States. It's not just coincidence. So again, on that front, it's weaker as well.
Ian, just on this point, though, so there's a lot of figures floating around. The Iranian state media has said that $300 billion is somehow going to be found to
That's a different thing.
Iran.
That's a fund. That's a fund. And that's a fund that was nominally discussed. And it would be, the money would not come from the United States. It would largely come from the Gulf states. The Gulf states, when you talk to them directly, say they still have no idea what this thing is, but some money has already gone to Iran and more surely will, and this could be a component of it. There was a recent meeting that Trump had with advisors where he said he was willing to support a $300 billion reconstruction fund of non-American money to Iran if the Trump administration and Kushner and Witkoff got first look at market contracts that would be a component of that. So they wanted their piece, you know. But that's as pie in the sky, as JD Vance said. Well, maybe that would happen if they hit certain hurdles in the future, as a lot of the talk that the Trump administration has had over the past 2 years for reconstruction of Gaza, right? And I mean, like the investment that will come in, and you know, the slideshow that Jared had at Davos for what Gaza looking like a new Dubai. That's very different from what I was talking about, which is the billions of dollars that will be provided as a lump sum payment in return for the strait being reopened. That's what I'm talking about. And those numbers are nowhere close to the 300 billion, but they're a lot larger than the pallets of cash that the Obama administration unfroze Iranian assets for the JCPOA.
Yeah, okay. So let's be clear on this front. There is 3 billion that I think has already been released, 24 billion that is likely to be released. But how much is this in the context of the economic conditions of the Iranian state? It must be absolutely hell on earth, heaven on earth for them to have that kind of funds now.
Well,
to be able to reconstruct the
Pyotr,
state,
you may remember at the beginning of the war, President Trump, the only oil that was getting out of the strait was Iranian oil. There were weeks where the Iranians were selling. They got their tankers out of Karg Island, they loaded them up, sending them to China, sending them to India, selling at much higher rates. And the Trump administration facilitated that because they wanted to keep the price of oil comparatively low. So, I mean, you know, clearly Trump's concern about funding the Iranian regime and the war-fighting capabilities that they would be able to develop with that cash, or passing it on to Hezbollah and other terrorist organizations, that was just not a high priority for the Trump administration, for President Trump himself. So the idea that now, when the strait is reopened and Trump desperately wants an off-ramp, that the Iranians are going to see more money, I mean, it's obviously inconsistent with Trump's political criticism of Obama for the earlier deal. But again, that's not analytically interesting because Trump criticizes everything that isn't Trump. It is utterly inconsistent with being concerned about Iran's funding situation. It's utterly inconsistent with wanting to strangle the Iranian regime to ensure that they will fall and that the Iranian people will be saved and rescued, as Trump said he would. that help was on the way after thousands upon thousands of Iranians were killed by their own regime in their demonstrations in January. So I mean, look, the principle. I can go whatever way you want, but the principal takeaway here is this war is an abject failure from Trump's perspective. The Americans have not achieved really any of their war goals. And in many ways, they've made their own strategic position in the Middle East and more broadly with allies considerably weaker by virtue of having decided to decapitate the Iranian regime.
So I've got a number of ways I could take this as well. Firstly, well, this let's combine this question then.
Okay.
Is it happened to be coincidental, Ian, that this deal was established or announced on Trump's birthday? Point number one. Number two, also in the tweet that he posted earlier today about Vance, was it yesterday or today? As one commentator, a colleague of mine said, he's throwing him under the bus. Is this Trump effectively trying to say that this is Vance's deal and it's crap because Vance was the negotiator, point man, and therefore blame him?
Well, first of all, I mean, I can't believe it's Trump's 80th birthday. He doesn't look a day over 65. I mean, the virility that the president brings to everything he does. I'm sorry, for a second, I thought I was a cabinet secretary. I lost myself for a second.
But you were Rubio for a minute.
Yeah, I know. Could have been any of them, frankly. Could have been any of them. Rubio's actually better on that count than a lot of them are. But nonetheless, I don't care. It was his birthday. I mean, it amused me at some level, I guess, that the Iranians refused to actually agree to the deal until the Monday Tehran time so that they could say they didn't do it on his birthday. I don't care. The point is, the Strait is not yet open. The signing, we hope, is coming on Friday in person. There is still plenty of potential for this entire thing to go up in smoke, whatever. The J.D. Vance thing is a different story. There's been, internal debate over whether this was a deal that could be signed. J.D. Vance never wanted this war to begin with and really wants it over. And he has essentially said that. He's basically said, look, it's not my role. I will bring my disagreements I will make with the president privately, and publicly I'm the vice president, will support him. And by the way, I think that is the appropriate. I mean, I've had many conversations with Jake Sullivan over the years. That is exactly the way he would put it as national security advisor. That's the way you should serve. So that's not a problem. The problem is that, I mean, JD wants to be president desperately, and you can't be president if you act like Kamala's, a vice president to Trump. And yet right now, Trump is at 38% approval ratings. And so his vice president is naturally stapled to a whole bunch of really unpopular things. And so to the extent that this deal is seen as weak, I mean, I can assure you that if this was a deal that was really strong for America, that we would have already seen all 14 points in the MOU. They'd be made public and Trump would be talking about how brilliant he is. And Lindsey Graham, senator, big supporter of Trump with a lot of access, wouldn't be saying this was statesman J.D. Vance's deal. He'd be saying it's Trump and Jared and what a wonderful deal they've done. So I think they're absolutely throwing J.D. under the bus because Trump can never be responsible for failure. And yet he doesn't really have anyone useful to kick this to. I mean, you can't blame the Europeans. They didn't show up for you. Yeah, but you didn't ask them and you went to war without telling them. You can't really blame, you say the Gulf states, oh, they won't do the Abraham Accords. Oh, they're the ones that should open the Strait. Well, I mean, like, you're the one that got the Strait closed. So, I mean, Israel, you can't really blame Bibi because that makes it seem like you're his puppet, and you're not. You took your own decisions. You're the one that had the Venezuela success. You were the one that ready to get this done in a few days. You're the one that said that the Iranians are about to, surrender unconditionally. So, I mean, it's the staggering incompetence, right? I mean, this is the thing that is really, look, there are several components of the Trump presidency, characteristics that he has that are unusual in how prominent they are compared to other presidents. Other presidents have had these characteristics to a lesser degree, but Trump really brings them to the greatest degree we've ever seen in a U.S. president. And they are his authoritarian impulses, personally, his desire to end checks and balances on his presidency, but also his personal preferences to other leaders that are authoritarian leaders, whether it's Xi Jinping or Putin or MBS or Kim Jong-un or you name it, right? Secondly, his personal kleptocracy, the view that he should be able to benefit financially directly from the office of the presidency and direct benefits to his family and those close to him. Again, we've seen this under many presidencies, but never to anything remotely like the degree that we see under Trump. And third, his policy incompetence. He lacks a lot of interest or knowledge in basic policy. He has many advisors around him that have a great deal of expertise, and he doesn't listen to them. And he's convinced that he's actually smarter than they are. And we see this whether it's on IEEPA and tariffs, where he was told very clearly by Jameson Greer and Scott Bessent and others that this wouldn't pass the smell test, and he went ahead with it anyway. And then the Supreme Court ends up voting him down. And we've seen similar issues, whether it's on Iran and the likelihood that the strait's going to be closed. I mean, on and on and on, we see just extraordinary policy incompetence. And that is what is really getting Trump in trouble here, is the fact that he knows better and refuses to listen to experts that are around him. And that's a danger. It would be an unacceptable thing. In the CEO, you would fire that CEO. But in a president, we reelect him. And that says more about the way the American people mistrust their leaders and believe that their democracy is no longer representative of them. So I don't see Trump as the cause of that. I think he's a symptom of it. But nonetheless, it does reflect how you could have an Iranian invasion that has been such a disaster, right? I mean, such a completely unnecessary series of policy mistakes for a president that had been doing actually pretty well on the foreign policy stage.
Well, as someone has just written in amongst the comments of the audience who are watching, a moron even amongst morons. So perhaps...
but he's not stupid. He's not stupid. I mean, the guy actually is quite intelligent. And he has a genius in some areas, like in marketing and branding. He also has an incredible political his instincts, like when he got up and goes fight, fight, fight after he is shot right in an ear. Like in front of thousands of people. You and I wouldn't do that, and yet, his staggering level of self-confidence and narcissism serves his policy impulses incredibly badly.
So I want to ask you quickly about the broader Middle East, which is simply, I'll outline what I think is happening, and then you can share your take. But what I think I can see emerging, and this is because of the strategic partnership that the Saudis and the Pakistanis signed in November, I think that we're seeing an emergence of a new grouping. It's not like 100% clear cut, but I think that the Saudis, the Pakistanis, the Qataris, and the Turks are working quite clearly together. I mean, look at the way that the Prime Minister of Pakistan singled them out in his announcement tweet. But then on the other side,
I would add Egypt to that group, but I completely agree.
To a lesser extent, but sure. In my opinion. And in the other side, you've got the Emiratis putting all their eggs in one basket, seemingly with Israel. And obviously that's in combination with the Indians and the Americans by a broader extent with the I2U2 initiative, which has been around for a while now, I guess. But do you think that that's happening? Do you think we're seeing these blocks and then the Iranians are sort of there and figuring it out?
Yeah, I have a piece coming out in the next couple of days in Foreign Affairs specifically on this, on the Islamic bloc and the Abrahamic bloc, and how they have fundamentally different long-term interests. Because
where does China fit into that then?
The Chinese are going to be far, far closer to the Muslim bloc, to the Islamic bloc. I mean, first of all, the Pakistan-China relationship facilitates that. Secondly, because the Saudis are leading OPEC, and they're going to be selling their oil primarily to the Chinese, and they're going to be competing with the Americans. Thirdly, Saudi Arabia's missile program is provided by the Chinese because the Americans won't sell them Tomahawks. And the risks that the Saudis take with the United States, if Democrats come into office after Trump in 2028, is very substantial. And the Saudis are thinking long term. They're not thinking, oh, I can just make all my bank with Jared and then it'll just be fine. So I think the Saudis, they'll still have a military relationship with the US, but it will be hedged much more with a more robust Chinese relationship. It also wouldn't surprise me if the Saudis end up buying Chinese tech because it's cheaper and because they've got budgetary issues and they have 35 million people and they're Saudis and they need to build their own human capital. The Emiratis are a very different story. They are all in with American, Israeli tech and military and intelligence and the rest. And I think that that is going to get stronger, not weaker. Now, the question is, which of those two blocks would you bet on long term? And if I had to bet, I think that the Abrahamic bloc has a much fatter tail risk around it because of Iran, because of terrorism, because they're less likely to create a modus vivendi with folks in the region that can disrupt them. And because they rely on globalization and stability in the region and expats willing to travel and all of those things. And the trends in disruptive technology, of course, make those things vulnerable. But the future is clearly not about who runs OPEC. The future is about who controls the commanding heights of AI and can deploy it effectively in the defense industry with intelligence, with surveillance, and for industry and for citizens. And clearly, the Emiratis and the Israelis are that bet, clearly.
But like it used to be that the Saudis, the Iranians were competing for the regional hegemonic status.
Right.
The Chinese are now in there. And I'm just curious how America has how many bases in the Middle East? It has how much physical presence? The Chinese do not have the same level of military.
They're in Djibouti, and that's it. That's right.
So, but they are doing a lot more with soft power.
Yeah.
How can the Chinese be a bigger power broker in the Middle East? Or you think there isn't as much projection for the Chinese?
Look, I mean, the Chinese did facilitate the Saudi, UAE, Iran. I mean, it was already happening, but they were very happy to host them in Beijing, and it looked better than not for China, so everyone was pretty happy with it. But when the Iran war started, the Chinese with Pakistan put out their 5-point plan, and then very quickly said, "Okay, you guys run with this," because they don't really have a lot of confidence that they're going to be able to get something done. And if they're not a principal player, they don't want to be responsible for something that's going to fail. And we saw that historically on Israel-Palestine. We saw it in Gaza. And we saw it with the fight between the Saudis and the Qataris that almost broke the GCC several years back. And I mean, now you're seeing it with Iran. So they have a lot of commercial power. And that commercial power gives them political leverage with the countries that they are trading with and investing with. But that's very different from soft power that implies that these countries are somehow just see that the Chinese are the model that they should have. Again, I think the technology question is the interesting question. And Chinese open source models like DeepSeek have the potential with infrastructure, right, have the potential to really matter.
So I'm conscious of time for you, but I do want to get a little bit of your quick take on the G7. And obviously, this is the first time Trump's going to be refocusing his attention to Europe. They had the phone call on Sunday, Putin and Trump.
Yeah.
Other than the brotherly love that they seem to have, or the idealization Trump has, what do you think will come out of that? Nothing. Because to me, Europe is largely independent with the US now, at least for support.
It's not independent from the US at all. I mean, it's wildly interdependent, but I mean, it's certainly, they are not coordinating policy very effectively. And, never mind Greenland, never mind the trade problems, never mind Russia, Ukraine, never mind Iran. How about the fact that the United States has just told the Europeans and everyone else, you don't get Fable, the most advanced anthropic model. We're putting export controls on it, but all the Americans can have it and we can use it for cyber attacks. Essentially, you're putting a kill switch on American technology that's essential for American allies. I think the Europeans are extremely worried and mistrustful of what their dependency on the United States portends for them over the coming years, and this will make for a very chippy G7.
Interesting. Well, we'll just have to have you back in for a good debate on that, because I have more cautious optimism, but maybe it's because I'm from Europe and I want there to be positivity.
I want there to be positive, absolutely. And I don't think that the transatlantic relationship is falling apart. I'm just worried about it. That's all. But anyway, nice to talk to you, man. It was a clever stuff.
Thanks a lot, Ian. Everyone for watching. Ian Bremmer,
Cheers.
Eurasia
Bye.
Group, G0. Take care, everyone. Have a good one.